Keith Haydon. I am Director of Technical Services for CJ Bio North America. Welcome, and today we're going to talk about arginine for the weaned pig. As most of you know, arginine has several functions, very critical functions, both in the synthesis, the molecules, the immune function, cell proliferation. One of the real concerns that we run into is that in the young pig, that most of the arginine that the pig gets actually comes from the mother's milk. So this has been an area of interest. But more importantly, recently at CJ Bio, we've been looking at amino acids in non-traditional ways. We all know that they're used as the building blocks for proteins, for both hormones, muscle, organ development, all that. But we're actually learning now that some amino acids, particularly arginine, have other functions. They actually have functions by themselves. And we want to explore a little bit of that today as we go through this. But one of the real concerns has been that the early pig on its mother does not get enough arginine. One of the early studies here, you can see that the arginine level decreased by 20 to 40% from day 3 to day 14 in the weanling pig. Suboptimal arginine will actually lead to reduced growth. Even though milk production rises as the sow goes through lactation, we are concerned that there's not enough arginine to maximize, particularly for gut development. And this is a very big concern of ours. So over the years, we worked with South Dakota State, Dr. Palenza here, and he looked at this on his own. He called me, we provided some arginine, but he wanted to look at arginine on the young weaned pig following weaning stress in this. So what he did is he had a control diet that was kind of a corn soy based diet, semi-synthetic, and then he added 0.3, 0.6, 0.9, or 1.2% arginine to the diet. So kind of set this up. This is a 3-phase feeding program, which is very common in the U.S. for weaned pigs. Phase 1 lasts about 7 days, phase 2 for an additional 14 days. And then on day 22, all the pigs were fed a common diet. So just to back up, the experimental diets were only fed in phase 1 and phase 2. There were 5 total treatments with 9 reps with just normal growth performance actually analyzed. Let's go through the data now. And as we see this, we can see that in the day 7, we had a linear increase in both average daily gain and feed intake, which is typical when seeing feed intake. But notice in the feed intake, if we look at this, it's not just linear. It tends to be more of a quadratic, but this also led to an improvement in feed efficiency as measured by gain feed. We saw the same thing over both the phase 1 and phase 2 periods. As you can see here, we had a significant improvement in body weight. As we increased SID arginine in the diet, pigs grew faster and they were also more efficient. Now, the interesting thing about this trial and the trial I'm going to show you later is these pigs were on a common diet from day 22 to day 42. So they're on the same feed. What's interesting about this is that the body weight gains that we saw in the first 3 weeks actually maintained through 42 days on feed. So we were actually able to maintain that increased growth rate. Another observation that they made was very interesting to me is they recorded the amount of pigs that either what we call a fallout, a pig not doing well that needs to be treated and put into a sick pen, and also pigs that lost weight in the first 7 days. We know that in a weanling pig, the most critical period is the first 7 days. We need that pig to be drinking water and eating feed. So one of the things you look at here is that they actually recorded the percentage of pigs that lost weight during the first week. You can see that that percentage significantly decreased as we added arginine to the diet. And this is a critical point from a production standpoint, is that if we have less pigs that we have to work with on fallout and fallbacks, it decreases a lot of our cost and the chance of those pigs making it all the way to market. So in this particular study that was done, what we can conclude is that we required about 1.6 SID arginine in phase 1, SID arginine to lysine ratio of about 107, and then phase 2 of about 118 to optimize nursery performance in the first 3 weeks. We also noticed that increasing dietary arginine actually reduced the percentage of pigs that lost weight during the first week of weaning, and also improved overall growth performance through the entire nursery program. So once this trial was concluded, we worked with Dr. Grinder's group in Iowa State University to look at arginine both in a feed and water basis. Arginine is extremely soluble. And again, as we talked about at the very beginning, is that arginine has some functionality. So we were very interested in looking at water-based arginine in this study along with feed in this. So to range this one up, we actually had a 3x4 factorial. We had 4 levels of water at 0, 4, 8, or 12% arginine. And then we also had a basal diet, which is a normal control diet used at Iowa State University. And then we increased arginine up by 20 or 40 points of SID. Our goal was to try to get in a combination of almost 1.5 more grams of arginine per day in the diet. Much similar as we saw in the South Dakota State study, we fed a 3-phase program with the experimental diets only being used in phase 1 and 2 with a common diet in phase 3. We can see this a little more clearly on this particular slide as we outline the timeline of this particular trial. So you can see from day 0 to 7, we had dietary treatments, again, the 3 different arginine levels, but we also imposed the water treatments for those 7 days. At day 7, we actually chose 1 pig out of the pen. We oral cavaged them with lactulose mannitol solution. We'll talk about that a little later, but we also euthanized that pig and collected blood and ileum samples to look at GI morphology. The second phase diets were fed from day 7 to 21. Again, we did another oral cavage with lactulose mannitol, and then common diet were fed out to day 41. So in this particular study was a little different, but again, using normal diets, we did see overall in the 41-day trial that increase in arginine by 20 points to a 1.55 SID level, we improved overall body weight. The average daily gain and feed intake tended to be improved numerically for sure, but not statistically, but following very closely the body weights that we saw in the South Dakota State study. One of the interesting things was, again, we had taken that pig at day 7, 1 from each pen. We did villus height crypt depth and villus height crypt depth ratio. As you can see here, looking at first 4 of the water, and then the last 3 are the actual feed treatments. If we look at it, we can see that water had a significant impact on crypt depth by increasing crypt depth, and thus it actually had a significant improvement in villus height to crypt depth ratio, which is typically associated with a more healthy GI gut, if you will. The thing that was most interesting to me is actually this next part. This is the lactulose mannitol data. We use this, these are 2 large sugars, and we look at it, typically we would think that they would not be able to permeate the GI tract. So when we see, like in the control diet here, these first 4 bars are for the water applications here, 0, 4, 8, and 12%, and these are feed application, basal 1.55 and 1.75. What we can see is on the control and also on the very high level of water, we have much more of that lactulose mannitol entering the bloodstream. This indicates to us that we actually have what we would call a leaky gut, i.e. that large molecules are actually able to penetrate the intestinal barrier, which suggests that animal would be more susceptible to disease or E. coli and other type organisms. You can see that on day 7 that the water treatments of 4 and 8% markedly decreased the amount of lactulose mannitol. But it's like most things, if you overdo it, then we can actually reverse that. We had a slight but non-statistical impact looking at it in the feed, but definitely the water treatment had an effect here. What's even more interesting to me is on day 21. Now remember, these pigs were only fed the water treatments for the first 7 days. So now this is 21 days later or 14 days after the water treatment, and we still have a significant decrease in the amount of leaky gut that we would have on the pigs that were particularly fed the 8% water treatment in that. So our conclusions of this trial was that it looked like we needed an SID arginine of about 1.55 or 103% of lysine. And in doing that, we actually increased nursery weight by almost 2 kilograms, 9% over the entire nursery period, if you will. Water tended to improve intestinal villus length, reduced lactose mannitol in the serum, but did not have any impact on growth rate itself. So it appears that the form of that arginine actually has an impact within the body differently. Now, we can't really theorize why would arginine in the water work differently than in feed, other than that pigs are constantly drinking water, if you will. So we're always having some type of supply of arginine to the GI tract. But this is something we'll follow up a little later. Well, these two studies really led to something that we're most interested in, is what is the arginine requirement of the pig. The current NRC that was done in 2012 lists the arginine requirement at about 0.43% SID or about a 43% of lysine, which both of these studies would say that's not correct. So we actually designed an experiment to do this. This is a dose response level looking at SID to lysine ratios over the performance of first two phases of nursery from 6 to 13 kilograms. We had 6 levels of SID arginine, as you can see, from 45% to 145%. And we went to 45% because that's as close to the NRC as we could get. We wanted to titrate this out. Again, we fed this in 2 phases. We had a phase 1 and a phase 2. And then we actually stopped the experiment on day 7 at that point. Just to give you an idea of the diets, these are somewhat practical diets, if you will, using corn, oat groats, meal. We use corn gluten feed and soybean meal. We added a lot of synthetic amino acids. As you can see at the very bottom, we added L-lysine, L-threonine, L-phenylalanine, L-tyrosine, methionine, valine, histidine, isoleucine, and trip. We wanted to make sure that the other amino acids were not limiting when we did this. You can see that we increased the level of arginine up, and we also added alanine to give us an isonitrogenous, or IE, to put them both in the same protein level. And this is, you can see the phase 1 diet, SID of a 1.3% lysine, and then our increasing levels of arginine as we go. Again, about 20.3%. Phase 2 diets were very similar, and again, you can see all the different amino acids that are actually added in this particular diet. And again, this had a 1.25 SID arginine, and with the ratio again from 0.45 all the way up to 1.45. Let's get to the results. And increasing the SID arginine to lysine ratio to about 97%, improved feed intake by about 8.4%. Now, anytime we increase feed intake in a pig, we typically will get and should get an increase in average daily gain, which we do. We had a 9.4% increase in the SID arginine to lysine ratio from 45 to about a maximum of 96%, which is exactly what we would expect over that period. And then that also turned into an improvement in total body weight at that point in time. So what we concluded out of this trial is that the 6 to 13 kilo pig has a much higher than the NRC estimate at 43% of approximately 96% of SID lysine to maximize feed intake and growth rate. However, feeding excess levels of arginine may reduce performance. So again, this data strongly suggests the NRC current value is too low. It's likely 2x that, and CJ actually recommends the SID ratio in the young pig of about 96 to 97%. Additionally, we need to think about arginine supplement to water may have some very good benefits that we'll have to follow up with. We really thank you for your time. Appreciate it. And if you have any questions, please contact your nearest CJ Bio.